Okay, we are live for episode 74 of Trek Live. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. We got a packed show. We got a lot to talk about, so I'm thinking that the structure is going to be a little bit different normally than what we normally do. We normally start off with how our rewatch is going. So definitely go over to Twitter to find out how that's going. I figured we can just kind of jump into some news. And then later on in the show, we can move into some Discovery pre-show. But, Bill, how you doing this morning?
Doing good. We got a lot to talk about. It was a big week in Star Trek news, and it's going to be a big week this week with the Discovery coming back. So it's kind of all happening right now. Yeah, I'm looking forward to diving into it and kind of talking about all the things that are happening with different shows and development and things starting to come together with Picard show and some news with the new movie that may or may not happen at some point. And then I'm definitely looking forward to talking about Discovery Season 2 kind of generally as we kind of lay down our feelings and maybe a prediction or two or, whatever the week before it starts, before we actually know what's really going to be happening. So, yeah, like you said, it's a jam-packed show. We're going to have a lot to talk about. And I think we're going to skip out on some of the usual formatting that we do with, starting off by talking about a rewatch and all that. I think this is a good week to just kind of dive right in and talk about what's happening. So let's do that. Let's start off with the Star Trek 14, whatever you want to call it, the movie news, which, depending on who you are and how you feel about the Kelvin timeline, might be really sad and depressing news, or I guess there are people out there who are really happy about this, that, this is potentially shelved. But to kind of sum it up, there have been stories about Chris Pine and Chris Hemsworth, who was supposedly involved. That character was going to be in the movie. The script had been written, and it was going to involve George Kirk somehow, seemingly through some kind of time travel thing. But they were having contract issues with Paramount and battling back and forth. That kind of put a drag on this. They had hired a director. S.J. Clarkson is her name. She's done a lot of TV, and now she's agreed to go. She made an agreement to go direct the pilot for an upcoming Game of Thrones prequel series, which kind of telegraphs that this project, Star Trek 4, is kind of hit the skids a little bit between the contract problems and now director who's leaving. So not a whole lot of good news on the Star Trek 4 front. How do you feel about this? I know you're a Kelvin timeline guy.
Huge Kelvin timeline.
Your intro to Trek. Yeah. So what does this leave you feeling? I mean, do you think it's dead? Do you think it's good, done for good? Is this a temporary setback? I mean, there's no way to really know, but where are you right now on this? How do you feel about it?
I don't think it's completely dead. We'll never see it again. I do believe it is shelved. It sucks because I hate to see something like this be taken down by something like contract disputes and money. It just sucks when something gets so successful that this is bound to happen. It just sucks that something great like the Kelvin timeline has been shelved. I think they had a great opportunity. What they had, kind of brainstorming how the story was going to go, sounded interesting to me. And hopefully down the road they can kind of work that out.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. I'm trying to avoid the feeling that it's dead for good. I mean, Star Trek's no stranger to these kinds of contract disputes. This is not the first time there've been battles like this, particularly back with the original cast. Nimoy had battles with Paramount that ultimately got resolved over time. So this isn't a brand new thing, but I think it was kind of maybe bound to happen in some ways. To their credit, a lot of the really everybody in the cast from these movies, they were largely kind of unknowns pre 2009. Chris Pine specifically, particularly. Simon Pegg and Carl Urban were kind of known quantities and all, but a lot of these actors were not household names at that time, and they have become that. Like Chris Pine's a movie star. He's a pretty big. He headlines movies. He's been in a wide array of things, and he's a draw. He's a legitimate movie star. So, I think things like this were kind of bound to happen. It's been 10 years now since 2009 came out. It's been like 11 or 12 years since these guys were like signed and like in production.
Starting pre-production. Yep.
Yeah, in the world of Star Trek. So it's been going on a long time for these guys, and I'm sure they're, mixed feelings on their end about, I want to do it. Maybe, work with my friends. You hear those kinds of quotes a lot when they talk about these things. All the actors say, I love my castmates. I'd love to get back to work and do it more. But there's also, I'm sure, an element of I've been doing this a while and probably prepared to move on if, the deal isn't right.
Right.
So I think we were probably on this road to some challenges, with contract stuff for a while now. But it does upset me a little bit. I'm a fan of the Kelvin timeline. I think it's a nice kind of offshoot thing. I think it gives the movie world a little bit of a different taste. I think it's probably more suited to the movie world. They have a little more creative license to do things because it's in this separate timeline. And I've enjoyed all three movies. I thought that Beyond left a really good taste in my mouth with where the characters were and possibilities coming away from that movie. So I was really hoping to get another one and another few really because I love the cast. I like the story of the Kelvin timeline, and it leaves the movie series kind of in a world of uncertainty. Who knows where they go from here if this is indeed kind of on the shelf indefinitely. Maybe the movie world goes quiet with Trek for a little bit again. I guess there is the Tarantino thing kind of floating out there too. So who knows if they'll just go right to that and what that even is. I know he's produced. I think he's in post-production for a movie that comes out this summer right now. So, by the end of the summer, that project that Tarantino's working on will be kind of wrapping up, and I guess by that point, all bets might be off, and maybe that'll be the direction. So it's going to be interesting. I'm not a person who was cheering about this and thinking that it's good that it's kind of done potentially, but we'll see. I'm certainly not. I'm not of the mindset that it's dead and buried for good. I think things can change quickly, and you never know. It just might take time.
Jordan has a great comment.
Yeah.
I think it would have been a tougher pill for me to swallow if there wasn't other Trek on. I feel like it does bum me out, but at the same time, I feel okay because there's more Trek on. Now that being said, I think this is kind of a missed opportunity because I feel like we're moving into this age where there's going to be a lot of Trek on, and I think that's a great opportunity, for the Kelvin timeline to kind of step up and into this new age of Trek, which sucks that they're not going to be able to join that. So
yeah, that's a really good point. And there's Trek on now. There's a Picard show coming. There's more on the way, apparently. So there's certainly not a shortage of Star Trek out there, and I don't know if that might impact Paramount's thinking. If they feel like there's plenty of that, we don't want to oversaturate. Although they have no. I guess that was probably a silly comment because they have no.
Yeah, looking back in the past,
from our standpoint as fans, it's certainly not what it would have been a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, where if this stopped, it's like, well, then now what? There's kind of no hope. Where now, it seems like Trek is here to stay for a while, at least on TV. So I'm thankful for that. This isn't our kind of one and only hope for new Trek. We're not where we were 5 years ago, where like the only new Trek we were getting was a new movie every 3 or 4 years. There's a lot on the horizon. There's a lot of good stuff hopefully coming. In a variety of stuff like we're going to talk about, all these different projects that are at various stages of development. So I'm thankful for that. I think we're not going to be hungry for Trek, but I'm kind of sad to see this go if it's going to go. I felt like there was more meat on the bones after Beyond.
Definitely.
I think there was, like you had mentioned, I thought what little word was kind of leaking out about the direction they were going with the fourth movie, with Chris Hemsworth somehow being involved.
Yeah.
I was ready for that. I thought that sounded. I was hopeful that it was gonna work, and that they had a cool concept in mind. We don't know anything about the details of that story. Hopefully, we'll find out someday, even if it doesn't happen. You know, these things tend to, especially in the Star Trek world, tend to leak out, and you
over time
find out. Yeah. Jordan says Paramount is in a poor position as they don't really have the ability to create Trek and have it exist as a film like you can on TV. That's true. Like it's hard in the movie world to kind of start fresh and in 2 hours, like introduce a whole new thing. They're relegated to reusing characters if they have to get wider audiences. I think Jordan's probably onto something there. I think the prospect of kickstarting something new in the movie franchise for Trek is a challenging notion, and I'm sure it leads to a lot of head scratching if they think about that. I don't think it's impossible. I think it could be done, with good writing and a cool idea, well executed concept. I think could work, but it's certainly a more uphill battle than falling back on the classic characters the way the Kelvin timeline has been able to. So it's going to be interesting to see where they go. The Tarantino thing, what the Tarantino thing has, whether you kind of like him as a director or not, is that he's kind of a name brand. Like people know Tarantino. There are people who will go see Tarantino stuff because it's Tarantino. And I think his very presence in the universe would generate enough, like, what is that, to make people interested and make that a project that people would pay attention to. Whether or not it's good or not is up for, who knows what it'll end up being. But I think, like what Jordan's saying, to kind of kickstart something new, having a name like Quentin Tarantino attached to something like that might offset some of those challenges, to get people interested and get a wider audience. I think Tarantino's presence might help with some of those things. But again, we don't know anything about like what that project is. If it did involve the Kelvin timeline cast or some of it, or it's an open question, and it's going to be interesting to see if that still has legs and if it's still alive and kicking, or if it's maybe dead and we just don't know yet. So Jordan says anything is possible, and that's kind of where I am. I think it'd be a mistake to this for good. This is not, the Star Trek's a known thing that has been through ups and downs before, and I think it'd be a mistake to assume that dead means for real dead. We'll just have to see how it plays out and enjoy the Trek that we're going to get in the meantime, which we're going to talk about right now. Some of this other stuff that's on the horizon. Something kind of smaller, I guess. We'll lead up to the Picard thing because that's probably the biggest story. But Alex Kurtzman, who's sort of the overseer of all things Trek in the CBS world, the new Rick Berman, all powerful TV Star Trek guy, made a comment about we already knew about Star Trek Decks that is going to be developed by Mike McMahon from Rick and Morty. That's a known quantity that's coming. That had already been announced, but Alex Kurtzman made a comment over the last week about additional animated series that are also in development, I guess, with the idea that other show or those other shows would be more aimed at a younger audience, and that it potentially would not be on CBS All Access. I think he also said that it would be placed somewhere where young people could, kids could like stumble into it and find it, and hopefully from their standpoint fall in love with Star Trek through a show aimed at younger people. Do you think this is a good idea? Do you think this is needed? Do you have any thoughts on this? Would you watch this?
I would probably watch it. It's Star Trek. But the thing is, I wasn't sold on the animated series first animated series to begin with. I would be hesitant. I think you asked me if it was needed. I could go either way. I started watching like Star Trek middle school, so I mean it definitely can be I'm not saying it's needed, but it can be done, and it can be done in a great way. That being said, I'm not sold on the animated idea. I will just have to kind of wait and see with bated breath.
What they do.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. You know, we've talked about before. Neither one of us is a huge fan of like the animated series. Now, granted, that's a 45-year-old, 70s animated show. So there's not a whole lot of probably correlation between, you know, what this new thing would be.
Right.
But that's a show that I don't tend to go back to. I watch it every so often. I have a lot of memories with it because I was a young kid who loved Star Trek as a really young person. I was kind of indoctrinated into it, but I was obsessed at a really young age, and it did speak to me. Like I didn't necessarily need an animated show to get me interested in Star Trek. The animated series is not like what cracked my interest. It's something I enjoyed as like a side thing, but the original series and the Next Generation is what got me hooked as a young kid. But I think maybe it's an open question. I had a parent who was into it, and I watched it with him. But if you don't have that, and Star Trek: The Next Generation is a lot on things like BBC America, and there's a smaller channel that I think some people have that runs all of the shows every night. But TV is such a different thing now than it used to be, where there's so many channels and so many things to watch that it's maybe a little more difficult to find these things. And certainly, having all the new Trek, the new cool, different, stuff is going to be on CBS All Access, which is like a subscription service that not everybody has. And, kids might not be able to just turn on and, go watch. And not to mention, Discovery is certainly not a show that's like aimed at kids. It's a little more mature. It's a little more dark than some previous Star Trek shows have been. So if you're talking about like recent Trek and stuff that's happening right now, maybe they do need something accessible for young people to catch kids. I certainly don't think it could hurt. But the key, I think, like Jordan kind of echoed what I said earlier, that how you distribute it, how available is it? Is it going to be on at a time and on a channel that kids are going to find it on? Animated dead Klingons for the kids. Yeah, that's what they need. All Access is not the best platform, Jordan's basically saying, for something like this. And I agree. If your aim is to get kids young, I think putting it on a channel on TV at a time when they can kind of stumble into it and find their own interest. I think it's an apt, probably smart direction to go in, and something that's worth exploring if you have the resources to do it. It can't hurt, like I said. So I'm curious to see what they do. I'm open-minded to it, depending on, the type of show it is and the type of story it's telling, and, how young is it aimed. I'd certainly be open to watching it and giving it a try. So we'll see. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. As far as the other animated show, Lower Decks, like you were saying, and you've said over time since it kind of was announced, that you're a little mixed on that idea. I'm a little more excited about it since seeing The Escape Artist. I really enjoyed The Escape Artist. That's written by Mike McMahon, who is going to be the showrunner and the guy who's creating that Lower Deck show.
Right.
If that's the sort of, that, like I said, I've said many times, I don't watch Rick and Morty. I'm not really familiar with the show. So that was my first kind of taste of, his stuff. So that gave me a little bit of confidence.
Yeah, I think, Kurtzman and the whole kind of CBS team is kind of playing the market. If we look at, what's popular, The Simpsons, Family Guy, you mentioned Rick and Morty, South Park. I think that is very popular right now, and I think they're just kind of trying to play that market and also kind of explore it because, like we've said a lot on the show, is that Trek is a Swiss Army knife. I don't doubt the ability that Star Trek can do this. I just worry about the execution and how that's going to go. So That's my only worry.
Yeah, it'll be, I think, getting the right people involved for something like that. People who maybe have some experience, developing shows that are aimed at kids.
Yeah.
But hopefully are smart shows, I guess. I think that's going to be important. Not to if you're going to try to get kids interested in Star Trek, it's got to be Star Trek. Like if you want it to actually work, it has to turn them on to the idea of what they're going to find if they grow into
live action,
the big boy track.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yep.
So big boy and girl. So that's going to be key. It's got to have a connection to what you ultimately want them to fall in love with on the bigger picture.
Yep.
So it's going to be all about the execution, like everything. I think, but it's. I guess the thing that I take away most from it is that they are practicing what they're preaching. I guess as far as like kind of, they've made a lot of comments, Kurtzman and others, I guess, from the CBS management, that they don't want to do like repetitive stuff. They don't want to kind of repackage the same thing and just put out a bunch of that kind of stuff. Like they're trying to if they're going to be doing a lot of stuff to bring Trek back and fill CBS All Access airtime and do all these different things, that they want these things to be different, named to different people, and have different tones and directions. That seems to be the direction they're going in. It sounds like Discovery is obviously one thing, and Lower Decks is a completely different thing. This is going to be a completely different thing than that. The Lower Decks concept and the Picard thing sounds like that's going to be different than Discovery, tonally and type of show it's going to be. So it's going to be interesting to see like how they execute all that and the types of different boxes that they check with these different shows. But I'm glad that's what they're doing, and they're not just sort of putting a different spin on Discovery, for example, like not trying to just repackage all that formula stuff. I think that's the right way to go. That's how you keep it fresh and relevant and people from getting tired of it. Some of the things that Trek may have fallen prey to in the past. With a lot of content happening.
Are they doing a show about like one of the most iconic characters in Star Trek, or
they might be?
Yeah.
Yes. Like maybe their most famous and beloved actor that's alive right now might be involved. Absolutely. Yeah, they are doing a Picard show. No title for that yet, but they did reveal this week, Alex Kurtzman did, that the show is going to take place, which I think we already knew timeline-wise, it was 20 years post-Nemesis. I think he said that like pretty early on. But that it's going to deal with a big event in the Prime timeline, which was the destruction of Romulus, which is the thing that sort of set Nero off into the past, into a different timeline, ended up at the Kelvin. Like, it's sort of the last thing that we know about that happened in the Prime timeline. And it's the show's gonna, I guess, explore how that event impacted Jean-Luc Picard at that time. And to me, that actually makes a lot of sense, because the last time we saw Picard was in Nemesis, which is not ultimately, I think, a really successful movie. That's certainly one of the more divisive pieces of Star Trek out there. I'm not a huge fan of it, but it does leave Picard in a place where, he's dealing with the Romulans. He's got one of the better scenes in that movie. He's standing in the Romulan Senate with Shinzon talking about, hope for peace and, leaving behind the old ways and trying to work towards a better future. Like, he's clearly got the idea in his head that, there's hope here with the Romulans. And there's a scene during the battle sequence at the end of the movie where he has an exchange with a female Romulan commander in it who comes to help the Enterprise and try to take Shinzon out. And there's a hint of hope there as well, that Picard's going to try to, start peace talks with the Romulans, or try to open up a new dialogue and move it in a different direction. So, with those kinds of threads left hanging after Nemesis, it kind of makes sense that something like the destruction of the Romulan Empire, how much of a focus it really is. Like, are the Romulans going to factor heavily into the show? Is it going to be about like what happened to the Romulan people, the Romulans who survived that catastrophe? Or is it just going to be like the backdrop of, where Picard is emotionally? I think that's all open to speculation at this point.
I think this is a logical course of action. I think forever fans have been wanting a show, another show post TNG, post Voyager, kind of that closer to the kind of the more I don't know, future as opposed to like a prequel show.
Sure.
Which I think, like I said, fans have been wanting for a while,
Yeah.
and it's cool to kind of fill in the gaps, like these shows, kind of, pre-Kirk and stuff like that. But I'm really excited to kind of go to the kind of the other end of the spectrum, and especially with a character that has so much to offer, to explore, past and present. So I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, me too. Jordan's asking if we've read the Countdown series of comics that are like the prequel that lead right up to 2009. I have not read it, but I'm pretty familiar with the story. I know in that Picard is like an ambassador who's pretty heavily involved with the Romulans, right? Jordan, I'm assuming you've read it, if you're asking about it. But my understanding is that implies the same thing as well, that Picard has some heavy involvement with the Romulans and the state of the Romulan Empire and its relationship with Federation at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't agree more. This will be the first time since have to straddle continuity in some way, even the Kelvin timeline, even by separating it and putting it in a different timeline. There's still this constant tug and pull of, what's too far, what can we get away with,
what's canon,
what's canon, what can't we override.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be the first time in a long time that they can do something that does not have to really take a whole lot of that into account. They can do whatever they want. They can move forward without the fear of overwriting something or stepping on anything's toes. But at the same time, because it's set 20 years after Nemesis, 20 years roughly is the amount of time that has passed since Nemesis, by the time this airs. Not only can you have the benefit of that, where you don't have to straddle canon the whole time, continuity, you still do have the ability to kind of call back to this wide array of old Trek that people love. Like, Kurtzman left the door open for members of the Next Generation cast being involved somehow, whether it's like recurring one-off guest, like anything. And then it's not just the Next Generation cast. There are members of the Deep Space Nine and Voyager cast who would make perfect sense. Like it's 20 years post Nemesis. They're all alive and kicking in the universe, seemingly at that time. So you have that ability to go completely in a fresh direction and not have to worry about continuity. But you do have these things that you can pull from in the past, characters, and you can refer to storylines and build off of storylines. So it's not a complete clean slate, where you have to completely, start something new. There's this baseline of things that you can play with. But I think it's going to be really refreshing to kind of go into something and just say, okay, take me where you're going to go, and not worry about trying to connect dots. Like, one of Discovery's challenges is, and it's something that I like about the show, that makes me a fan of the show, is I like the kind of connect the dots kind of storytelling that they're trying to do. The stuff like I mentioned last week, talking about Lethe and how it connects to Journey to Babel and Spock and Sarek's relationship. Like, I like all that, and I like season 2 seemingly will work in some development with Pike that might make sense with the Cage and the menagerie and Spock's relationship with Pike. Like, I like doing that, but it'll be refreshing to have a new show that you don't have to do that with, that you can just say, take me where it's going, and kind of disconnect your brain from having to play that game with connecting dots with all the continuity. So I'm really excited about that. I think there's a really blank canvas there that hasn't been there for a while, because between the Kelvin timeline and even Enterprise, even further back, this has been something that Star Trek's had to do for a long time. It's other than Nemesis, it's been Endgame was the last episode of TV that Star Trek's produced that didn't have continuity to recognize.
So we can only go up from there now.
We can only go up from there. Yes.
I think, like you said, I'm really excited for the blank canvas. But they also have this great foundation that they can build off, like you said, storylines they can explore and stuff like that. So I think it's making for a great recipe for success as far as the show goes. And I think it's got a lot of people excited. So,
yeah. Are there characters from the Next Generation that you'd the most eager to see in a show like this? Who would make the most sense?
Well, obviously, right. I think Riker. I think Crusher,
Sure.
Worf. All of them, I think are on the table. Especially right now, just where I'm at in my rewatch. I think Guinan and Picard's relationship just feels as strong as ever, and I think it would be fun to kind of revisit that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, Picard Crusher's definitely really ripe for like where are they? 20 years later, where does that relationship stand?
Yeah.
If he's dealing with a lot of emotional turmoil because of the Romulan thing, might he need a counselor too? I mean, that makes sense too.
Yeah.
You would. I think it's all on the table. Who knows? But they're certainly not going to have to twist my arm to see any of these characters again. Even Ro, like Pensky File says, I'd love to see Ro again.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. There's no end to it, and there are characters from the other show. I think somebody on Twitter was like speculating if the Romulan Empire's gone, like who would like the Cardassians like want to step up and fill that void and end up being like the big, who knows? Like I'd love to see Garrick and characters like that again, and doing it this way, like where it's not set too far into the future and it's kind of contemporaneous with the amount of time that has actually passed, 20 years or so. There's not really anything stopping you from pulling any of these characters into the show, as long as it's the right thing to do story wise and it makes sense with what they're doing and the direction they're going in. There's a lot of possibilities there, so I'm really excited about all that. And like I said, having that blank canvas and being able to go forward with the story without needing to second guess, continuity and how things are going to affect. Like sometimes it's not even, like this story has a direct impact on continuity this way. But for nerds like me who have seen the shows many times, it's sometimes like a 5-step process. Like sometimes like a story will have like they'll tell a story and then it leads to things that make you think, well, think about like down the road, how is it going to affect like domino effect stuff for how things are affected down the road in the continuity. Having the ability to kind of turn that part of my brain off and just watch the show and see where they're going to take it is going to be extremely refreshing. And as somebody who loves Enterprise a lot, I'm excited and loves Discovery too, like these prequel idea shows. I'm excited to kind of move in a different direction. Have a little different taste. So of all these different shows, and we didn't talk about these, there's clearly like in a lot of these articles, it's pretty often cited, like there's the Starfleet Academy show also kind of in development. Real quick, Pensky File saying, in his opinion, the post-nemesis setting is the only one that makes sense. The prequel nature of Discovery only serves to make things more difficult for the writers. Yeah, that's a pretty common, and it does make things more difficult for the writers. It boxes them in a lot of ways, and they have to rise to the occasion. And depending on, I know Pensky Files, I know you're not a huge fan of Discovery, and I respect that. Dan and I both are into the show. We're fans of it. We like it. But it makes life more difficult for them to thread the needle and to catch, a wide net of people. So I definitely respect that. I'm hoping that this concept is, as long as it's well written and it's well done. Mike Chabon is involved, who wrote Calypso. He's Pulitzer Prize winning author. His interviews seem to indicate that he really knows Trek. He loves Trek. Having high quality writers like that all leads me to think that the writing's going to be good. And as long as the writing's good, I'm hoping that the show is more successful at, being less divisive, I guess, than Discovery has been.
Yeah.
That would be nice to see. Although I won't hold my breath because Star Trek's always divisive when it's new. Jordan says he would definitely hope that they take the story very slow. I assume they want to catch up with all our favorite characters before we launch into a new story. Yeah, I mean, who knows? Like, I'm curious to see like how many of these characters involved with the story, or if they're going to be like kind of outliers who we see at some point along the way. A lot of it's up in the air.
I think it is also, just real quick, ending thought, it is also kind of they could have an opportunity to kind of introduce some new characters, and maybe further on down the road to kind of pass a torch into this is the kind of 90s Trek that we know, that's kind of passing the torch onto the kind of the future of you know, future Trek, I guess, instead of like the prequel Trek. So I think it's also I want to see past characters, obviously, but I think there is an opportunity as well to introduce new characters. So
yeah, absolutely, and I hope they do. They need to. They need to. It's a show. It's going to be a show that functions on its own. It needs to be its own thing. It's they've been pretty clear that it's not a sequel to the Next Generation. It's not the next chapter of the Next Generation. It's
not the
a
next
new idea.
generation.
No, it is not. So that would pretty strongly imply that they're going to be fresh new characters, and that's a good thing. As much as I love the Next Generation, I'm happy that it's not just a continuation of that story.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be something new that stands on its own. But what I'm starting to ask is, like, with all these other shows that, the Picard thing, I know it's not Lower Decks, but the Starfleet Academy idea that's also kind of in development. Who knows where it stands, but it's been reported a bunch of times. And mini-series with Khan, like, which is the Picard show the one that you're most excited about, or is there something else kind of on the horizon that you're pumped about too?
Because I think it has the perfect balance of kind of this iconic character, but also the potential to have great new stories to build on. This great foundation that has been set already. So
yeah, I would agree. I'm excited about seeing where all these things go because I'm a Star Trek fan, and I've been asking for a new track for a long time now, and finally getting a lot of it. So I'm excited for all of it. But I still have to pinch myself pretty often that Nemesis is not the last time we're going to see Picard, which has been like kind of a given for a long time. Like when I sat in the theater. Yeah, it is. It really is. Like for a long time, you kind of watch like I do, watching Star Trek kind of chronologically, and that 24th century story kind of comes to an end with a thud with Nemesis. That's the last time you know anything about these people. Picard, especially, is, like I've said many times, my definitely favorite character in Star Trek history. He's my guy, and just the idea that that's not the end of that character is an amazing thing that I'm really excited about. Discovery Penske File says Discovery would have worked Fuller's anthology idea, but as a continuing series, it gets more difficult to sustain, and the writing in season 1 was just so weak. I hope season 2 surprises him. Surprises me. I agree with you. I hope it surprises you too. Like I've said a couple times, Dan and I both are fans of Discovery season 1 and are excited for season 2, but I'm hoping that season 2 does enough to kind of turn some of the people that weren't fans of season 1 around and catch people, catch some new fans. Would be nice to say.
I do agree with you that the anthology show is looking more attractive, and I hope maybe down the road they explore that as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really neat idea.
Yep.
That I think it would be cool to explore for sure. I thought that was a really outside the box concept.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I guess speaking of Discovery.
Yeah, we should probably transition to kind of talking about season 2, what we know about it, what we think about it going. I know I've since I've gotten the Blu-ray of season 1, I've rewatched it a few weeks ago. I've been kind of in and out of it. In the meantime, I drop in and watch an episode here and there, which I don't usually do, but I'm doing for this. Just kind of have it fresh and have that flavor in my mouth before the season starts. What are your hopes? Like, what are you kind of hoping to get from season 2? Do you have anything that's kind of on your bucket list of things that you're really hoping for?
I am very excited for season 2. I didn't watch any of it, which I planned on it, but I'm kind of testing out this theory of, like, I'm calling the Golden Gate Bridge theory. Is that at the beginning of season 1, it's really focused on Burnham and kind of this single character, and by the end, it almost feels like a crew and a little bit more than just like the single character that we're kind of seeing this world through. And I'm curious to see, are they going to stick to that, or are they just going to be this is how they become a crew, and we kind of explore, a type of show that's like the Big 3 or the Big 4, but before it was kind of more focused on Burnham. I'm just curious of how, this season 2 maybe just goes, this is the crew, But at the same time, it's hard for me to see that going that way because, we're adding more characters. So I'm curious as how that's going to go as far as just the show structure as far as in season 2.
Yeah, I have the same question, and I know Alex Kurtzman has said things like that, that's kind of their mission. They kind of want to make the show feel a little more cohesive as far as like how the crew operates together. And you kind of saw by the end of the first season, I'm thinking of like What's Past Prologue and that battle scene.
Yeah,
it feels a little more like Trek as far as like how the crew's operating and that they're kind of a cohesive unit. You see them operating in their roles and doing their thing. My instinct is season 2 hopefully will focus on that and make it a little bit more of a crew. Hopefully it'll be about that sort of journey, like to let this crew kind of settle into place and become a Star Trek crew the way that we are used to. That would be nice. And it would be cool to see that journey happen. Like usually in these shows, you kind of get right to it. Like in The Next Generation, it kind of settles into place pretty early, and that's what they are. And in TOS, you jump right into the kind of the middle of the 5-year mission, and that's what they are. They're pretty much a cohesive unit doing their jobs. Deep Space Nine, you get a little bit of it between the Bajoran militia people and the Starfleet. Like they have to kind of meld over time, and you see little tastes of that. And in Voyager, they maybe had a promise of that with the Starfleet and the Maquis, but it not necessarily a whole lot of development there. That kind of happens off screen, so to speak. So I'm definitely open to the idea of this show kind of showing us how that happens, how that family gets formed. And to kind of piggyback off that, I would like to see some of those sub characters, like the kind of faces around the bridge that get a line here and there, and you kind of know what they do, but you don't really know anything about them. I'd love to see a little bit more development for them. I definitely, they're not going to become major characters by any means. I think we know who our major characters are going to be, and that's fine. But I'd like to get a little bit more of a taste of like who these people are, and have them involved in the missions a little bit more. Have them go on a landing party thing and get to know them a little bit. I think that would help the show as well, and that's something I'm definitely hungry for. Anything else for you that you're?
I'd love to see. I'd love to see just take the show kind of in a lighter kind of direction. Yeah. To me, season 1 was so heavy and so I don't want to say dramatic. It was very dramatic. It can still be dramatic. I just
takes itself so seriously.
Yeah, it takes this not so serious. Yeah, I just watched The Dark Knight, so that kind of yeah. So yeah, that's another thing. And from the trailer, I gathered that it does feel a little bit more lighter. They're going to be joking more. So yeah, I think it looks promising, but that's one thing that kind of is on my checklist of season 2 to see. I'd love to see a little bit more lighter show.
Couldn't agree with that more. Star Trek has always been something that, because of its nature, I guess, where bright future, optimistic. When it's at its best, Star Trek tends to be about good people doing good things. Being good friends. Having that sort of feel gives a levity to the show that I think wasn't always there in season 1 because of the type of story they were telling. So I definitely, that would be a welcome breath of fresh air as well. I couldn't agree with that more. Penske File asked if he's mentioning that, and I have read some of these. They're the spoiler-free ones, at least. Early fan site reviews say that early season 2 is more like the Trek Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Is that a good thing or is it a bad thing?
That's a good thing for me. I hope that they. It feels like the Trek that we know, but it also isn't, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I think that Discovery has done a good job of kind of turning what we expect on its head. So I'd love to see a little bit of the kind of the Trek that we've known, I guess, watched before. So
yeah. I'd like it to feel a little bit more familiar while kind of maintaining its own voice. I think that's the needle that needs to get threaded.
Right.
You know, you don't want it to be too familiar and too derivative of like 90s Trek. You don't want it to feel too much like, you know, we're trying to be just like this. Like a certain other show that I really like that's on Fox here in America sometimes feels like. You know, I'm a fan of the Orville and I enjoy it, but sometimes it feels like it's trying too hard to fit in that little box. And I think that's a feel that should be avoided. Yeah, Dan would disagree with you, Penske File, that it's the weakest of the original series. But he's saying Voyager was like the new, but also the weakest. But I get what you're kind of saying. Like a common criticism that may have been lobbed at Voyager too is that it was too derivative. It kind of told the same kinds of stories we were used to in TNG, and you know, Voyager was certainly tagged with like it's TNG light back in the day, and people still feel that way. So I think that's a temptation that should be avoided. You don't want to get too close to what's been done. But, I think if it feels more because of the way the characters are interacting and it has that sort of positivity to it that may have been lacking a little bit in season 1, I think that'll be a benefit to the show. But I certainly don't want derivative stories and even like derivative character arcs. You know, I want to see fresh stuff, but with that tone and message and kind of intangible stuff that makes Star Trek Star Trek. Rob agrees. He wants to see more of the bridge crew too. I think that's pretty common. Rob. Yeah, good to see you too. Yeah, absolutely. But that's a pretty common ask, I think, among the fans, that they would like to see people like Arium and Detmer and Wushikin, the different bridge role players actually get a little bit more to do, just a little more involvement. And I'm hopeful that they'll do that. I mentioned this last week. I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent about it, but I would like, because I'm a fan of what they did with like Lethe and time, the Spock or the Burnham Sarek relationship into the Spock Sarek relationship that we know in Journey to Babel. I talked about how I think it's really cool that something that comes along 50 years later is kind of giving the stuff from 50 years ago kind of a new flavor and something else to watch for. Like it helps keep that show. It almost makes it new again. Like going back and watching Journey to Babel is a whole new experience now, because of, if you accept Lethe as, you know, if you're a fan of Discovery and you like that, it makes Journey to Babel have another layer to it. I like that they're doing that. I think that's pretty cool. And I'd love to see, you know, things play into why Spock was so loyal to Pike in the Menagerie. You know, like if this story leads to a little bit more depth to that, and there's more layers there, I think that'll be a success too, and I'm all for that. I think for a 50-year-old show to still be getting new layers added to it, given new reasons to kind of revisit it and go back to it, I think that's good for TOS. It makes me eager to go back and watch it again and look for all these things, little things that could be retroactive hints to stuff in Discovery. I'm all for that.
I'm excited for kind of the musical chairs they're kind of playing with the captain seat. I think that, you know, Anson Mount has a little bit of pressure, being that, you know, the performance of the previous captain that sat in that chair was pretty good. And I've always, you know, been a fan of the captain and exploring that role. So, yeah, I'm excited for them to kind of explore that in season 2 as well.
Yeah, one of the things that I've read in a couple of these early reviews that have been out, the Penske File mentioned, is that they do explore that, I guess, in this first episode. The crew having to react to the difference between Pike, who is like Mr. Starfleet, like the perfect cardboard cutout of a Starfleet captain who does it all right, is by the book, and is like the model, like what you would imagine a Starfleet captain to be, after the experience with Lorca, who was the complete opposite and was not genuine and was off to, you off on his own thing, is something that I guess is going to be a focus early on in the season, at least, seeing the crew react to that difference.
Yeah.
Penske File thinks that the changing captain is maybe Discovery's best idea, and he's not a fan of the Spore Drive, which he says might be the worst idea of the show, which is not an uncommon thought, I don't think, out there. Penske File. I don't necessarily agree, but I'm a little more open-minded to it. But you're certainly not alone in that take. Not being a huge fan of the Spore Drive. I'm curious to see what they do with the Spore Drive this year. Like, is it totally shelved? Are they not using it because of all the reasons that kind of got laid out at the end of the season, where it's, not entirely safe, and leads to all these pathways to different places that they really shouldn't be going, like Mirror Universe. That's kind of an ongoing thing that I'm kind of curious to play out. Like, you have to assume that it gets classified and buried in some deep file somewhere, because obviously we don't know about it in the future. But seeing how that story kind of develops and how it ends up there is of interest to me. I'm curious to see where they take that. And I imagine that's going to, like, Calypso might be built off of that somehow.
Yeah,
like, that's just kind of tucked away out in deep space somewhere. Yeah.
Which, from the beginning, I've always kind of had my head buried in the sand, because, I mean, the Penske File does have a great point in that it hasn't been mentioned before. Why is this technology there? The ship is kind of built off this technology that we've never heard before. I've always kind of had my head kind of buried in sand, like.
Sure.
And I think maybe, like, this is maybe a step towards why we haven't, is because it is just so unpredictable and just unsafe. Yeah, I'm kind of excited to hopefully see maybe that they explore that kind of down the road, why it maybe does get classified. And but speaking of classified, I am excited to hope that Michelle Yeoh definitely kind of sticks on, because I am a fan of having kind of that Mirror Universe tie-in, which is kind of crazy to think, because if you guys remember last year, I wasn't the biggest fan of going to the Mirror Universe, so I'm excited to kind of see how they play out.
Yeah, you were pretty open with that, like, even early before they did. You're like, I kind of hope we don't go this way.
Yeah.
I mean, we all kind of saw. We all knew it was going to factor in somehow, but you weren't on board with that in advance. But I think you turned out to be okay with it the way they did it, I guess.
Yeah.
But Penske File said something I agree with. If they shelve it, the Spore Drive, that's terrible, and I think that's true. If they completely just and left it sitting there and just kind of pretended it didn't happen, I think that would be a colossal mistake, and I don't think that'll be the case. I hope that's not the case.
Yeah.
I don't know that they'll use it much, or maybe at all, but I'm hoping that it's a story thing that they have to deal with, and in a credible way that makes some sense.
Yeah.
would be nice. You figured that season 1 would do some kind of time shenanigans to redo retro fix it. Yeah, I mean,
it's possible still. Who
knows?
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah. I suspect that it won't be a time travel thing. I think it'll be a classified, need to know, buried in deep space, never to be found again kind of thing.
Yeah.
But we'll find out at some point, hopefully.
Yeah.
He jokingly says that the Picard series opening log will mention the Spore Drive, and it'll be like it's been there all along. Yeah. That's ill advised. They should not do that.
No.
That would be a big mistake.
No.
People would freak out.
Yes.
Is there a character that you are most excited to see back and get more development? Like, what character are you the most interested in season 2? Like, is there a story thread, a character dynamic that you're curious about, or?
I think Saru and Burnham, that brotherly sisterly rivalry going between them. I definitely like that. I think their relationship is strong at the end. I am, again, I want to stick to the captains here. I am excited to see Anson Mount and the new captain. I don't know
Yeah.
how. I'm curious if they're going to explore how the epitome of Starfleet goes from what he is right now to later on down the road in TOS. Just be interesting to kind of see that play out.
Yeah, the extra development for Pike thing for me. I'm really excited that there's going to be more of that, and like number 1 is going to be in it from the cage and menagerie. I think she looks great. Like I think she looks like Majel Barrett, kind of like the long black hair, and like I'm excited to see that character, and definitely all those like again like more layers to characters we kind of thought we've seen everything we're ever going to see. Pike and number 1, that cage crew.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see what happens there.
Yeah.
Another big thing that I think it's been out there for a while. Maybe he said it at Las Vegas or something, but evidently Wilson Cruz plays Dr. Culber is in the main credits this season. Like he's a regular.
Huh.
So how that plays out, Stamets and Culber and that dynamic is interesting to me. I want to see what they're going to do with that. He made no bones about it. He's very involved and he's there and part of the cast, and he's very much in season 2. Right. How is certainly an open question. Evidently, the mycelial network somewhat does something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting story thread to me. That I'm eager to see what they do with.
Yeah, it should be definitely fun to kind of explore if he's in the main credits. Maybe flashbacks, maybe I don't know.
Yeah, one thing that they kind of telegraphed even back then, at the end of What Passes, they jump back to the regular timeline or home timeline. Is there's this like green spore that comes out and lands on Tilly's shoulder, and they kind of said, "Pay attention to that; it's gonna matter." Something tells me that Culber somehow. Something to do with that. Yeah. We'll see. But I'm glad that he's back. I really like that actor. Good in it. I think he's really good in the show. I think he's got really good chemistry with Anthony Rapp. I think that relationship is a highlight of the show. I think it's unique to that show, and the characters are good together. I think it's a good dynamic for the series, and interesting to see where they take it.
Yep.
But yeah, I'd say that and what you mentioned with Pike and his involvement are probably the two things that, like, going in, I'm like, yeah, I'm ready for that. I'm really excited to see what they do.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess my final thing that probably I'm looking forward to is kind of rewatchability. If we go back and look at season 1, I think the way that everything plays out, I think it just adds to the kind of rewatchability of the show.
It definitely does.
I feel like in today's, just how TV shows are presented, you gotta have something like that makes it, like, adds to the rewatchability and makes it, binge-worthy, I guess.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see if they explore that, or if they'll just go in this whole new direction. Just curious to see if they do anything with that. So.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about too. Like, absolutely. Like, kind of just watching a little bit of it yesterday and a few days before. Watching episodes like Context is for Kings with the knowledge of what's coming with Lorca, it's like a whole different episode.
Yeah.
It really does. I think for me, add a lot to the rewatchability of the show, and I think, I mean, that may or may not be a unique thing to season 1, and to see what season 2 might do to bring about something like that is interesting. Like, are they going to have some sort of added layer that's going to make it,
right?
Kind of twist or something that adds to that. But the other thing I'm curious to see that we talked about a lot during the season last time was this kind of mix of serialization. Obviously, season 1 has a very serialized structure. The stories all lead into each other, but something that I was pleasantly surprised by that I've said times is that it mixed in enough episodic stuff. Like, Context is for Kings is a very different kind of story and kind of episode than Lethe is, than CD Pacem Parabellum is, and Magic makes it. Like they all have, like, especially in the first half of the season, maybe a little more so than the second half. But even there in the second half, the episodes have like their own voice and unique tone. You can tell them apart if you're looking at it that way.
Right.
Even in season 2, I mean, in the back half of season 1, the wolf inside is very different than what's past Spurlock.
Yes.
The kind of story it is.
Yeah.
The tone of it are different. I'm hoping that they kind of walk that line in season 2 as well. I'm all for the serialized, having a single thing kind of pulling you through the season that rewards you at the end. But I think it's important for Star Trek to maintain that Swiss Army knife kind of thing that we talked about, like being able to tell different kinds of stories, play with genre, and not be one note in that kind of way, because it never has been before. So I'm curious to see if they do that this time around, or if it's going to be more like single tone through it. We'll see. There's a lot of questions that we're going to have answered very soon. Can't believe it's like 4 days away.
It's crazy.
Yeah. I think I saw something about it's Thursday night, which is different than last year. It used to be Sunday. And for a long time, I thought it was going to be 9:30 Eastern time. And I saw something the other day that I think said 8:30 Eastern time. That it'll premiere, like it'll be available on All Access.
What time was it on last year?
It was like 9-ish, I think.
Okay.
I think. It might have been, I don't know. 8:30 maybe? I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah, I guess I'll have to go. Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah.
I want to say it was 8:30, actually. I think, because I remember it starting around the same time as like Sunday Night Football. Around that same time. So, I don't know. But I also remember it being a little inconsistent. Like it would sometimes drop like 15 minutes early. Sometimes it would, like you never quite know. A lot of time like spent like refreshing the app, waiting for it. Never quite being the exact same time. I don't think After Trek is back. That's another like little side thing. I think a lot of people have been like, there's been like no word about it at all. Not much, whatever. It's not.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah. It. I think it got a little better over the course of the season, but there's I had a hard time with it.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. There's plenty of places to go to listen to or watch like post Discovery analysis. There's like no shortage of options if you want to get your fix on that. And we're in that menagerie, so
we are in that category.
So there's plenty of opportunity for that. So really excited. Next week we'll be talking about Brother, episode 1 of season 2. And for the next 14 weeks, we're going to be along for the ride and hoping for the best. Hoping it's good. And can't tell you how excited I am for another new season of Star Trek. After all these years, it's back again. It's times are good. So, and Penske File, I sincerely hope that it wins. I know you have not been a fan. I've listened to your show. I know feelings, but I'm really hoping that people who are of your mindset, who think of Discovery the way that you do, some of you are kind of won over by season. I hope that it's different enough and does a good job enough to win over some new fans. That would be good. So, but we'll see. We'll certainly find out very soon.
Yeah, so this has been kind of our first episode, or our first kind of, I guess, episode of kind of into our Discovery coverage. Like Bill said, we got 14 weeks of it. Hopefully we'll be able to supplement some of that with some other content. I'd love to kind of revisit maybe Trek After Dark, get the STO stream going. So yeah.
Looking forward to it. And we're going to be available on a whole new platform very soon, right?
Yes. So this will probably be the first episode that's going to go live. I mean, not live, but go on our podcast feed on iTunes. So we finally got that going. Bill and I have been wanting to do that for a long time. Finally be able to make it happen. So we'll be we still want to emphasize that you guys should come here live. You guys make the show. But the next day it will be available on the iTunes feed as a pre-recorded. So you have that access to, on iTunes, on and where other podcasts are found.
Absolutely.
I don't use the garbage iTunes app.
Yeah.
So yeah, I will. We will get working on that. Post the next day. Yeah. Great time to be a Star Trek fan.
It is. Unless you're a huge Kelvin Timeline guy. If Kelvin Timeline is your thing, now is a sad time to be a Star Trek fan.
Yep.
But,
Yep. Yes. I guess wrap it up. The discussion does not have to stop here. Definitely come over to Twitter if you want to hear more about Star Trek discussion. Come over there to let us know your thoughts. To the Discord channel. And now the podcast feed. So, yeah. We will see you guys next week to talk about Discovery, which is a crazy thing to say. I'm excited.
Yep, me too.
Yep.
Thanks everybody who was here with us live. Penske File, Rob, Bryn Salem, Jordan. You guys were all great. You contributed to the conversation, and we definitely appreciate that.
Yep.
So, everybody have a good day.
Yep. Thanks for watching.
Yep.